Good afternoon and welcome to World Travel Market London. I am Fiona Ashton, Marketing Manager for World Travel Market London and also Arabian Travel Market in Dubai. It's great to see so many people here today for an eagerly anticipated session. I'm pleased to say that WTM London enjoys a long-standing relationship with Phocuswright, and it gives me great pleasure to hand you over to Florence Kaci, European Market Specialist for Phocuswright.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Fast Track session at World Travel Market by Phocuswright. Fast Track sessions are a series of mini sessions condensed within a program. So I'm Florence Kaci. I head business development in Europe for Phocuswright and also a European market specialist. Phocuswright is the travel industry research authority on how travelers, suppliers, and intermediaries connect. We deliver our findings every year during our global annual conference, which will take place next week in Los Angeles. We've also launched a series of regional events, such as Phocuswright Europe, which will take place in Amsterdam this year in May, and Phocuswright India, which covers our event for the whole of Asia Pacific, which will take place in February in India. The State of Travel Startup in 2016. That's the introduction that I will give you before joining a panel of discussion where we have our 3 panelists already sitting there, where you will be asked also to ask some questions. So we have this tool called Slido offered by World Travel Market. You can go through the World Travel Market application on your mobile. If you go to the event page, if you scroll down and find the Phocuswright session, right at the end you will see a Q&A button. You can enter any question you like, and we will try to answer them as much as possible during the panel of discussion. For most startups, the entrepreneurial dream yields a fierce battle for relevance and market share today. Whether ending in failure, which is the most common ending, industry-altering success, which I believe is still rare, or something in between, which is also very common, their stories give clues to the direction of the travel industry today. Phocuswright selected carefully 3 startups that I will introduce you to just after this short presentation. Each of them have penetrated the travel industry at different times with different objectives and will be here today to share their own experience and visions of the market. The key findings of the report that I'm going to introduce you now analyzed 1,252 travel companies between 2005 and the first quarter of 2016. They were all focused on digital travel. They're featuring technology, commercial, or segment innovation. They all have a product that launched in market or is credible and verifiable beta and backing. Between 2005 and the first quarter of 2016, those digital travel startups qualified for this study and attracted more than $32.6 billion in funding. Startup activity accelerated following the global economic recession, with over 200 digital travel companies founded each year. From 2011 to 2013, 212. 213 new travel startups in 2012, only 49 in 2015. Amid a flood of travel startups, funding began to climb during this period, and investors sought out the best opportunities in travel. While the travel landscape awash in entrepreneurial ventures, investors had their pick of new and established startups. 10 most funded companies within the travel industry received 68% of the total funding. Uber represented 24% of them, Didi represented 16%, Lyft 6%, Ola 5%, Grab 2%, Airbnb 7%, Trivago 2%, HomeAway 2%, and then you will find the other 32 travel startups. Phocuswright has tracked digital travel companies in 71 countries worldwide. But travel startups have largely emerged from 3 regions: the US for 37% of them, Europe for 27% of them, and Asia-Pac for 28% of them. Nearly 90% of the funding has gone to companies in North America and Asia-Pacific. As you can see here, 45% came from the US, 43% from Asia-Pacific, and only 9% from Europe. Why is that? Are European travel companies less innovative, or is it something else? I'll ask the question to the panelists a bit later on. The travel startup funding in $1 million and share by region between 2005 and 2016 shows a very different growth. North America was definitely leading in 2005. As you can see today, close to the end of 2016, Asia-Pacific is one of the biggest regions in terms of travel startup funding. The European startup attracted half of the funding of North American and Asia-Pacific startup. It represents an average of $9 million for companies in Europe. Asia-Pacific and Europe have captured the largest share of funding within the lodging industry, and 2 of our panelists today relate to that industry specifically. If you look at this slide, the share of funding for Asia-Pacific has reached 50%, and if you look at Europe, only 30%. But the share of startup is also much higher in Asia-Pac than in Europe or North America. 9 out of the 10 most funded companies are concentrated today in just 2 travel verticals: ground transportation and private accommodations. While some travel startup categories are flush with both companies and funding, others have crowded field and limited support from investors. We've looked at different categories, mixing vertical and horizontals for all those startups. And among the vertical categories, lodging, ground transportation, and destination content were the most popular area for travel startup. The destination content category is very popular amongst entrepreneurs, but not amongst the funding category. Ground transportation and private accommodation were the only 2 categories which were funding, and share exceeds share of startup against air, lodging, and so on. 17% of the shares of companies for ground transportation startup, with 49% of the shares of funding. For private accommodation, for example, the share of companies was 30%, but only 13% of the shares of funding. For air, as an example, just as a comparison, 14% of the shares of the companies and 9% of the share of fundings. But there is so much more to ground transportation than just point-to-point taxis. We've observed numerous companies emerging over the past 2 years, just as the one listed here. Redbus is a great example, founded in 2007, acquired by India's Ibibo Group. Meanwhile, there is a list of unicorn companies which are valued at over more than $1 billion today and have continued to grow. With 4 companies receiving the total funding in the billions, the race is now on among major ground transportation players to capture the market share. You can see here the examples of Uber, Didi, Lyft, Grab, and so on, who are the best examples of this category. Our innovators, and 2 of them who are here today, participated in Phocuswright Europe in May last June, or will take place in our Travel Innovation Summit next week in Los Angeles. So I'll now join them for a discussion about their own experience, their own vision of the market, and I will ask each of them to introduce themselves and the company before we start the session. So I'd like to introduce you first to Mike from Traveler. Please, Mike, if you can introduce yourself and give us a bit of background in 2 minutes about what Traveler is and where you come from.
Okay. Traveler, we're based in the south of France in Nice. We were founded in 2013 because we saw the opportunity to improve the digital experiences across really all phases of travel for airlines. We had seen that airlines, especially small to medium-sized airlines, were having troubles building cohesive user experiences. And so we started building a technology platform. Everything that we do is B2B2C. We have two primary core products. One is Travel Pass. Travel Pass is an airline booking engine. It's a managed trip tool, an online check-in tool, et cetera, that powers airlines. And then a new product that we've recently launched in 2016 based on the demand for conversational interfaces is called Conversational, which is a chatbot conversational commerce product for all travel companies.
Thank you very much. So I'll introduce you now to David Schessler from SiteMinder. And I'd like to give you a bit of background, as SiteMinder is now, we believe at Phocuswright, more than an established startup. David has been involved in many startups in the past, and we thought it would be of great interest to the audience to hear about his experience between the different startups, but also as an established startup now, his recommendations, because I would believe the audience will agree that once a startup is considered as established, you can't just sit in the back seat and watch your business model growing. You have to constantly innovate, which is the primary objective of SiteMinder, and the reason why we asked David to join the panel today.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. SiteMinder, as you've noticed, we're 10 years old, so we might not be in that true generation of startup. We try to maintain the heart of a startup within the organization, within our culture. We started in Australia, 10 years ago, helping hotels connect. Many of them were using extranets to manage their distribution. So we started with a channel manager. We then evolved with a booking engine. We've created a website development tool. We have rate intelligence solutions. And now we're also providing connectivity to the GDS for hotels. A few years ago, we were maybe 4,500 hotels. We did a second round of funding, a B round, that enabled us to scale, open more offices, and now we have over 23,000 hotels using us and our platforms. So we've gone a little wider in our technology stack, and we've gone global in opening more markets and new offices. So 10 years, two founders, predominantly technologists. So they've started to bring in some people that are more hospitality focused to start to add more scale and skill set to the organization. But again, that heart of a startup in the culture is really important because it really drives the business.
Thank you very much, David. So our last panelist is Olivier Gemayel from Deuse. Please, Olivier, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm the co-founder and the head of business development at Deuse.com. We're a one-of-a-kind OTA, as we don't sell hotel rooms during the night, but only during the daytime. So now with Deuse, it's possible to actually rent a hotel room anywhere around the globe just for a few hours at a very attractive price. So we've been doing this for 6 years. We're present in 18 countries. We have a bit more than 3,000 hotel partners, so not there yet. And we realized the largest Serie A funding in Europe at the end of last year, raising 17 million euros. And we have plenty of plans for the future, developing in Asia, also maybe doing a second round, and signing more and more hotels. This is examples of some cities where we are with different hotels. You can see that there's very good prices, very good discounts on those. We do about 1,000 reservations per day now, which is roughly 20 million euros of revenues to our hotel partners. That's at the end of 2016. That's us.
Thank you very much. So my first question would be, we've seen a lot of very successful companies such as Uber and Airbnb who've created fresh opportunities for the industry. They have provoked the rise of competition and clones across all the different regions, and they've inspired a lot the ecosystem of startup. So my first question would be, and maybe we can follow with you, Olivier, where did your inspiration came from?
Well, all the founders are former hospitality people. I've worked for 15 years in hotels. I'm a member of the Clédor. And in the hotel industry, you get sometimes people asking for a room just for the day, whether couple or businessmen or people in transit. And so we realized that there was absolutely no place for them to actually book, no offer on the web. So we tried our luck, and that was 6 years ago. So that's how we founded the Use and how we came about creating that startup.
What about you, Mike?
You know, I would say we're a very customer-centric company. Everything we do is based on talking to real customers. And in this case, it came from speaking with airline customers in person, online, and learning about the problems that real people were having every day on airline sites.
You worked for Amadeus before, right?
Yes, I worked for Amadeus for a couple years. That's how I came to France. And while I was there, I started a group called Customer Experience Strategy and Design. And we learned a lot about what customers need. And frankly, the travel industry has a lot that it can do to provide a better user and customer experience. And so we were inspired by real people who had real problems, and we wanted to do something about it. And a lot of times the technology that's being built today for airlines is being built by large companies who aren't necessarily in touch with customers. They're in touch with their developers and software needs.
Okay. So in 2016, part of the study that we just completed, we've observed that the hottest combination for travel startup between their vertical and their horizontal has been air and booking, lodging and booking, destination and social, and ground transportation and booking. So I'd like to ask David, how do you keep up with innovating?
Well, innovation, it's not something you keep up with, you're constantly doing. It's a constant state of improvement, right? It's a closed loop feedback from your customers into the organization so that you can learn what's working for your customers, what's working for your support staff. So innovation is always or should always be an inherent part of the development of the company. The interesting part is that we're all trying to solve problems, whether it's a problem with connectivity, a problem with the function, the user interface, etc. So when you're doing that, a lot of the development nowadays is iterative. I create something, I test it, I look at it, I want to fail fast and keep improving. That also allows you to stage gate your funding so that I'm not throwing all of my money out building something and it doesn't work at the end. So that iteration and that constant improvement is a process, but it's also part of a culture now when you're a startup or a small company.
So you don't take the Apple approach. You first look at the market.
No. I think, again, it was solving a problem. Our two founders, Mike Ford, Mike Rogers, were on boards of hostels and surf hotels. And they found that the amount of time to manage online through an extranet was exorbitant, and there wasn't a lot of free time. So they solved the problem. But then out of that, and that knowledge and learning, they learned about booking engines and how important Booking Direct is. And they learned about rate intelligence and how they can bring that in. And it's all iterations, and all knowledge and learning is coming from the customer and from the teams that are built, and that collaboration and that sharing. So that iteration and that constant development, that's got to be at the heart of the organization. And why, again, I say we're still a startup, even though we're 10 years in. It's that focus on that development and how to solve problems and do it better.
So one of the main questions that I believe an investor would ask you is why now? So why now?
Well, we're the first to do this. Since we've raised money in December of last year, we've seen 6 or 7 clones around the world that came out. We still think that we have about 97% of the market share, which is big. So going to us now would be making sure that we have those few years of advance towards our competitors, and that we're probably ahead in every way. I mean, we've done all the mistakes that there was to be made, and now we've corrected all of them, and we're developing a lot.
Mistake? Can you share with the audience? Is there more mistake on the technology side? More mistakes?
Not so much as a technology, but realizing that we're going to talk about Europe, that the market, the Latin side of Europe, and the more Anglo-Saxon side, the Latin side is very much oriented towards leisure, where the rest of Europe, for us at least, is a lot more business. So for us, it was really a test and learn, and it took us a bit of trial and error to understand that and to tailor the offer of the use and of the hotel towards those different types of clientele.
Okay. So before we move into Europe, I'd like to ask you the same question. How did you decide to do it now?
Well, I think for us, I mean, if you look at the research, especially if you go back to the United States and you look at airlines like Southwest Airlines, airlines are increasingly wanting to increase that share of direct bookings. And from an airline standpoint, they didn't have, and they still don't have a lot of different providers they can go to build a booking engine or a booking system outside of some of the large players that they get their PSS from. So it was a really good opportunity for us to do something now, because with the onset of the importance of mobile to a traveler, the importance of customer experience and increasing revenue, and the lack of technology providers, it was a great opportunity for us to do something and enter the market.
So talking about Europe, emerging markets in general usually go with big opportunities, and Europe is often perceived as an emerging market for some companies. So I find it quite interesting that we have today 3 panelists, one French-based company looking at expanding to the US or abroad, one American who's decided to settle down in France and base his business from Europe, even that the main airlines sit in the States, and David, who sits in the States working for SiteMinder, who's headquartered in Australia, and who was obviously developing strongly the business in Europe. Europe, I think everybody will agree, comes with a lot of challenges. So what would you say where or still are your main challenges in Europe? And is that easy to develop your business abroad? So maybe we can start with the most experienced here. If you can share a bit your background.
We came into Europe about 4 years ago and opened a small office in Hammersmith. Now we've grown beyond those doors. We've opened an office now in Galway so that we could expand even farther. Some of the cost basis is always a concern as you start to add employees. But Europe is very interesting for us in that while it's in close proximity, it's a very fragmented market. And localization or nationalistic tendencies can be very difficult to break into. We've had competitors in specific markets in Europe that we've had to do battle with, if you will, in order to come into the market and start to win some of the business. That was probably the hardest part, is localizing your materials, localizing your messaging, having staff that understand the regional requirements, and trying to be international is different than being global. And I think there was a transition phase as we matured as a company. The second round of funding helped as well, that we became more global in nature. And I think Europe had those unique complications, but we experienced in Asia Pacific and South Pacific, especially early days. And as we gained market share and owned market share in the region, it kind of gave us a plan, a blueprint that we could follow as we evolved into Europe. The Americas was one of the last markets we came into, because we thought if we could win in Asia Pac and in Europe, because of the dominance of chains in North America especially, we'd be better served focusing on rest of world and not North America. So I think Europe, like Latin America, has a lot of fragmentation and nationalistic organizations, and it's ensuring that you are thinking global but acting local. It's used a lot, but it's very true. So that was the most important thing that enabled us to really get over the hurdle of becoming a global company and not just international.
Yes, and I would add also, obviously Europe is extremely fragmented, and even, I think, probably the most on the supplier side. But when it comes to distribution, what we see as well is that now the European market gets more and more concentrated in terms of distribution. If you look at OTAs, and obviously 2 or 3 of them are taking all over Europe, which I believe can complicate things at one point for you and for your customers as well. So what about your experience, maybe, Mike?
Okay, I have to say this the right way, but as an American who came to France, I would say the things that attract me to Europe, and especially France, are also the things that can make it difficult to do business there. You know, it's a slower pace sometimes than an American startup, or people in the United States that I've worked with, you know, if they're not working 60 hours a week, then you're looked upon sometimes negatively. You know, and maybe if you're lucky, you take 2 weeks of vacation, and then in America, when you come back, you worry that something happened while you're gone, and you're on email the whole time. Well, you know, France and Europe are great for the opposite reasons of that, is that people value vacation, they value a live, work lifestyle. But as a business and a business owner, that can make things difficult, managing vacation times. And one that's, you know, I wasn't used to, but most of the time when you're trying to staff up, unless you're going with a contracting company, if you're hiring an employee, they typically have to give 3 months notice. And so you must, from an HR perspective, be planning, you know, way in advance. And as a startup, that's difficult to be managing that with, you know, for us, implementing new airline platforms means a pretty long project, but it means thinking 3 months in ahead or 4 months in ahead to hire someone to come on and do these projects, which can be challenging. You know, I'd say, you know, the same thing a little bit with the speed of the pace of work and things like that as well. But we were mentioned sort of global environment. I mean, our company has 20-something employees now, and we have 17 different nationalities. I think we speak 14 languages as well. So managing all of the cultural differences between countries from a user experience perspective, while balancing the localities and such is another challenge.
Olivier, you launched Europe first, if I'm not mistaken, but you've expanded in the US?
Yes, we've opened an office in New York in August, and also in São Paulo at the beginning of 2016.
So what's your experience? Do you find it easier?
No, found it harder. US for us is definitely a big challenge. I think any company that goes to the US feels that way. We're not although we're a startup, we're not a technology-based startup yet. We're working really hard to get there, and I hope in the coming month we'll be considered like this. To speak very simply, we don't have any connectivity. So in Europe, it's never been a big challenge. It's being a sales challenge, but not bigger than this. In the US, it's impossible to succeed if we don't have that, at least to the level where we want to go. So this is our next big challenge, and this is what we're facing now. Brazil has been doing great, so we're really happy with this. And we would like to launch Asia, or at least Hong Kong and Singapore, at the beginning of 2017. So we'll also face new challenge there, but we're ready for it. That's what we're aiming for.
So we've seen a lot of, especially over the past few years, a lot of funky, inspirational ideas amongst the travel startup. But as I just mentioned in the presentation, we've also noticed that success usually comes with very simple ideas. And funders usually tend to favor transactional models versus destination and itineraries and so on. We've observed that the biggest failures in the travel startup category in 2016 were amongst the itineraries and destination content and so on, because they don't manage to raise their funds, etc. How would you present your business approach? You all have a transactional model. I mean, those two. And I believe you've been pushing that, obviously, to raise funds. How has it helped you? And can you share your experience as well, as you're obviously more on the B2B side against?
I'll be the contrarian here.
So you'll be
our commercial model is very disruptive. And one of the reasons that I think we took the market by storm, we're a cloud-based solution, SaaS. And instead of charging on a per transaction basis, we went with a flat fee model and found that once you create the connectivity, the throughput is not as important. It's maintaining that connectivity. So going into a model where if a property gets 1,000 bookings and they're paying $1 a booking, it's $1,000. Well, with us, if they get 2,000, then it goes down and lower the more volume you put through, which is counterintuitive. That model was very successful in helping us gain funding, get customers, because we were disruptive. We have two businesses. We have the retail side that calls on individual properties, and then we have an enterprise side that calls on large groups and chains. Going in and showing a CFO or a distribution manager the cost of our program will actually decline over time the more volume they produce, yet produce more revenue for them. That was a great concept that they were able to latch onto, and that really helped us get the engine going.
So
we also didn't use contracts.
One of the exceptions that confirmed the rules.
Yep. Yes, so we were kind of the contrarian in the market. We didn't want to do it the way the other guys did.
Okay, what about you?
Well, I can completely relate to that. We don't take any credit cards. So we don't guarantee the bookings. And a customer on our platform can literally book a room in 20 seconds.
Which is a big challenge for hoteliers.
Absolutely. And it's also the key to success. But it is a big challenge as well for us to explain that the room is not guaranteed. That if there's a no-show, then they're actually not getting any money. And overall, the use has to very much educate and democratize a new way of thinking in the hotel world, where we're selling the room twice a day, and we're not selling the room classically overnight. So that's a big way for us, a big challenge.
Okay. You have anything to add?
I mean, maybe I'll take a slightly different approach, but I think what we see with airlines is just that, okay, look, I love inspirational travel. I love the great ideas that people come up with to explore travel in a different way, or connect them to a destination or a vacation or whatever it is. But with most airlines, especially small to medium-sized airlines, they're not ready for this type of innovative inspiration. It's like taking a Picasso painting that's like got so much value and hanging it in a house made of wood and straw. It's like airlines need to get their basic customer experience, especially their digital experience, in order. And then once they have the basics, people can, browse on all devices, any type of platform. Then they can start adding the more inspirational content, inspirational navigation, and things like that. So when we built our software, it is transactional based, but it's first to allow airlines to get things sort of in order, the basics, so that customers are happy. Then layer on top of that the additional pieces that provide an outstanding or a delightful user experience.
I'd like to take a little break and see if there is any question in the audience, either through Slido, or if you'd like to raise your hand, we have people in the room with microphones. Yes? Can someone bring a mic to this gentleman, please?
Hi, it's a question for Olivier. I was intrigued by your comment about not taking credit cards as a hotelier. I was wondering if you could give me a bit of an understanding of why you think that's a successful model.
Well, once again, everybody is used to renting a room for the night. Not everyone knows yet that you can rent a hotel room for the day. So the idea with not taking a credit card is to make it very easy for the customer to rent that room, and making him understand that he can actually modify, cancel the booking with no fees. So it brought a lot of clients to our platform, and it's not the case in the US, but specifically in Europe. They trust us easily. So that's why. It's a challenge towards the hotels, to make them understand that the reservation is not guaranteed and they won't get any money, as I said previously. But for the customer side, it was actually one of the key to our success.
Is there any other question? Yes, please. There's a gentleman here. Yes, this gentleman here. This one. Thank you.
I also would like to stick to Olivier and to his business model, because I am totally excited that in 2016 we can talk about a business model without any connectivity. So I would like to understand, how do you manage this? How many hotels do you have? Around 3,000, right?
Yeah,
so how does it work?
Okay, it's actually very, very easy. We work on a free sale basis most of the time, and on flat rates. So the idea is that we tailor to each organization and to each hotel. We call them, even though we have global agreement with Accor, Marriott, etc., we go to each hotel independently, and we understand their constraint in the organization. What time does the housekeeping start? What time do they leave? Specifically to this, we tailor a time slot, and then we fix a rate that has to be at least 30% to 75% off the average night rates. Once this is done, the client can go on our web app or on the website. The hotel gets an email of reservation, which he enters into his PMS. That's basically how we work. And because we don't have any credit card, we're a commission-based company. So at the end of the month, every hotel gets a bill, and they pay the commission.
Okay. Any other question in the room? Or through Slido? Yes? We have another question here, please.
Well, the question is for everyone, but how did you choose the next country for internationalize the company, and which were the factors to decide to go to a country or to another with the business?
So maybe, let's start with David.
A lot of times when you create a technology, you do it in English or your natural language. So sometimes that limits where you can go first. I have to go to English-speaking countries first, etc. Many times when you start to select, as you're going global, where do I go next? You're looking at market reports and conditions, how hotels are performing, where there are problem areas, things of that nature, where you might be the best solution in a market. So you're always trying to, they say in Jurassic Park, testing the fences. That's kind of what you're doing. You're always looking. You might put someone on the ground, see if that market is ready, and then put your larger footprint down. But by and large, you usually test first before you go into a market.
Mike? Especially you have
so
segments, so that'll be interesting.
So for us, because we work with small to medium-sized airlines mostly, a lot of them are already on the Amadeus Altéa PSS. Amadeus is mostly based in Sophia Antipolis in the south of France. So it made sense because our platform works on top of Altéa PSS. Airlines were already coming to France to have an office there. The second piece of it is that in Europe, Northern Africa, Middle East, and there's hundreds of airlines. Whereas in the United States, North America, there's 5 or 6. We knew that being based in the United States, the big 5 or 6 airlines were not going to work with a small startup, and there was a much better opportunity to be in Europe, where you could literally get to 100 airlines within a 5 or 6 hour flight. And for us, choosing which country to go to next is very simple. It's whichever airline chooses to work with us next.
Okay, so we'll wrap up the session. I'd like to ask each of you to give me one of your predictions for the next 12 to 18 months. Let's start with you, Mike.
I expect graphical interfaces to go away. The barrier between a customer and a company will disappear, and the majority of travel transactions will start to take place through conversations, not through graphical interfaces.
Great, interesting. Olivier?
I think that natural language and bots are going to be the way to go in the next 12 months in the future. I think that all the big companies are going to want to personalize their service a lot more through Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, WeChat, etc., etc.
David?
I think we're going to have a new president in the United States. I think what's going to happen is you're going to see more mobile. Mobility is going to play a much larger role, both in the purchase and use behavior, but also in the operation. So I also think voice and virtual reality and cognitive computing, there's a lot of this going on right now. With HTNG, of which I'm a member, there's a real focus on this collaboration and creating the ecosystems to operate. We've seen Internet of Things create a huge breach. So security is also critical, and I think it was a wake-up call for a lot of companies. Our focus is on PCI compliance, PII protection. So I think a lot of, the new things are going to be doing some of the old things better and doing it on mobile platforms.
So that was one of the questions I had. Can you just tell us quickly how you integrate mobile to your business model?
We took the approach in the very beginning that we weren't going to build just for web. A lot of our market, they have different platforms. They have a web platform, a mobile platform, an app platform. Our platform from the very beginning was to work on all devices, any type of screen, because we believe that travel needs to go where the customers are. And if customers are on a destination like a website or a destination like a mobile site, your platform should just work there. If it's a conversation in the future, it just needs to work there. So for us, from a graphical perspective, we've always been a mobile-first company, but we're more of a anywhere, anytime interface company now, whether that's graphical, conversation, whatever it be. And I think we'll continue to focus there.
Olivier?
Well, definitely, once again, more multi-platform and natural language bots. This is definitely the way we want to go, and connectivity, even though we're a bit late.
Mobile? We use responsive design and similar, so make sure that any device at any time, any location can work with us,
So
both
that's
from
really
a
integrated.
purchase perspective, but also that operational perspective. We want our customers to be able to access data, BI, et cetera, and use it.
Okay, great. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. David Schessler from SiteMinder, Olivier Gemayel from Deuse, and Mike Sloan from Traveler. Thank you very much.
I think that my colleague Florence stole my clicker. As Florence said, we're going to take a look at the European Consumer Travel Report, the 6th edition. This is a survey that we do every year in France, Germany, and the UK, with a pretty big sample size, 3,000. And we are looking at the search, shop, and buying process of travelers in the UK, Germany, and France. And we look at air, hotel, car, rail, cruise, OTAs, and DMOs. And we would like to know how do they, the travelers, how do they decide on a destination, on a hotel, how do they book, and how do they travel. Now, we've been doing that now since 2010, which is great because then you can separate big trends from one-offs, a hiccup in the market that sometimes people talk about, hey, that's a trend. And when you do something for so many years, you can clearly see, now that's a trend, that's a hiccup, don't bother too much about it. It's a very popular study that we do every year, and we also do, for your information, these studies in Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, India, Russia, and the USA. They're pretty big reports. They're with 57 graphs this time and hundreds of new data points. For today, I don't have the time to go through all of them. I selected 8 data points, graphs, and tables that I thought would be interesting for you. So let's take a look. First of all, when I say Europe in my presentation, I'm referring to France, Germany, and the UK, not all other countries in Europe. Although those 3 countries in total is 60% of total European travel market. Yeah? So, when you take a look at what's happening in Europe right now, I assume you agree that it's a marketplace of mixed signals and a lingering economic uncertainty. However, and that's interesting, more Europeans are traveling. More Europeans are traveling in 2016 than any year before. However, there are some interesting things happening. So they travel more, but they take less trips, and the trips that they are taking are longer, but they spend a little less. Let me repeat that, because I think it's a very important conclusion. So more Europeans are traveling, but they take fewer trips. The trips that they take are longer, but they spend a little less. So there was a big takeaway from our research this year. So let's take a look. Now I talked about those 3 countries in total. Let's take a look at the 3 countries individually. So in France, on the left, the pink ones, you can see 2012, 14, and 16. You can see there are more in 2016. Clearly more travelers, more people that travel. Same in Germany. They had a growth both in 2014 and 2016. And on the right, in green, you see that in UK, it is going down. And that's a little concerning, so let's take a deeper look into it. And look all the way to the left. That's what's happening. Younger people, 18 to 24, that's the group that is traveling less. All other groups, you see some balances and some, but that is the group of 18 and 24. That's a significant difference. A bit concerning, so we will take a good look at it in the years ahead. So travel for Europeans plays a really significant role. However, there are some things are happening that we haven't seen in the past. This is France. We're looking at where do the French people, French travel, where do they travel? And on the left, you see that in 2016, less French travelers traveled domestically within France. More traveled within Europe, and more went outside Europe. Yeah. Big difference if you compare that with Germany, where in terms of domestic travel, you see a clear increase. travel within Europe stayed the same, and also travel within or outside of Europe stays the same. But clearly, more domestic travel. And England is even different. Domestic travel goes down a little bit, but not significantly. But they travel a lot within Europe. That was on the increase, where travel outside Europe was stable. We not only look at why people travel, but we also look at why are people not traveling. And basically cost, or too expensive, that's the number one for all travelers from France, Germany and the UK, but especially for the French travelers. Too expensive is clearly the number one for the French. For Germans, I have way too much things to do, I'm too busy, is a reason to not travel. And in the UK, I don't feel like it, I don't need it, there's a lack of desire. This is a very complicated slide, but don't get too worked up about it, because I will walk you through it. Here we're looking at the bookings, accommodation booking of European travelers. So you can book, of course, directly from the hotel, or find an OTA, a traditional travel agent, all kinds of channels. Now look to the left in that area where you see a gray rectangle. Those are accommodation bookings made via OTAs. And you can see they really knocked it out of the ballpark in 2016. The OTAs, when it comes to accommodation booking, really killed it. Now, when we look at air bookings, we see a different picture. Especially French and British travelers, they turn to their own airline website and the apps to make the bookings. So the OTAs are not so significant there, doesn't play a significant role in airline bookings as with accommodation. While we're looking at accommodation, there's another very important trend going on, and that is the private accommodation or rentals. Here we see France on the top, pink, blue Germany, and UK green. And there's 4 sets of tables that you see here. On the top, budget hotel / motel, next mid-scale hotel, then upscale hotel, and then private accommodation. And if you see it in France, budget hotel is down, mid-scale hotel is down, upscale hotel is down. The only thing that's up is private accommodation. So the number of people that actually rent a home or an apartment or etc. via the HomeAways or the Airbnbs, that's clearly up in France, and that must have a significant impact on traditional accommodation. If you look at Germany, blue, you kind of see the same, budget down, mid-scale hotels a little up, upscale hotels down, private accommodation way up. So both in France and in Germany, you can see that private accommodation is the number one accommodation that travelers are choosing. When you look at the UK, you see that much less. Actually, budget hotels came down, mid-scale hotels up, upscale hotels up, and private accommodation down. So significant differences between the 3 countries. So digital channels have become the mainstay of European travel planning. We all know that. Amid mobile's rapid rise, however, desktop use has remained stable. So on the left, you have desktop. People that shop and buy travel on the desktop. First, I would like to go to the right, where in the middle you see shopping done on tablets. And you clearly see that it's still increasing since 2012. Not a surprise, but we see that the percentage of UK travelers shopping on tablets has tripled in the past 4 years. All the way on the right, you see shopping on a mobile device, and you see a very healthy increase there as well. And even Germany and the UK, you can see that shopping on a smartphone has doubled. Now, the big surprise here actually is all the way to the left, because back in 2010 and 2012, the industry said, and Phocuswright was one of them who made this prediction that said shopping and actually booking travel, be it air or hotel or car, will all be done, will more and more go to tablets and mobile. And you will see a continuous decrease on PCs, be it a laptop or a desktop, and that increase will continue. And we clearly see in 2016 that is not the case. it's stable, it's growing actually. People are using their laptops and their desktops again. So the PC is not dead, it's still going strong. So with an abundance of online sources available, how do travelers choose a specific website? Why does a traveler go to a particular website? And here are the reasons. And I would like to first go to the bottom, because there are two things on the bottom that I find very interesting. So if a traveler, is part of a loyalty program, be it from a British Airways or a hotel chain, that is not the reason to go to the website and to do the shopping and the booking. Yeah? If you have your personal information on a website, for example, booking.com or a hotel website where you have your date of birth, your credit card info, etc., when you have given that, you would think that would be a good reason for a person to go to that website, because all your personal information is there. It makes shopping and booking very easier. Now, we are looking here at shopping and not booking, but you see that personal information is not a reason to go to a website. So I found those two things, loyalty program, personal information, is not a reason to go to a website. Very important. On the top, you see ease of use and the best price offers, and I had a good experience with that website. Those are the reasons why people go back to a website to do their shopping. And the last slide I want to share with you is the leisure planning timeline. The time that it takes for somebody to actually decide on a destination, to make the air booking, make the hotel booking, and the actual trip. You see on the bottom that the destination decision for a British traveler is about 4 months ahead of the actual travel, followed by of course, your air about a month later and hotel. But look at the difference between, especially France. The French are much quicker, or they decide much later in the cycle where they want to go, and they make their bookings much later. Very significant difference between France and UK, and Germany is somewhere in the middle. And those were the 8 takeaways that I rushed you through. I hope it was interesting. And I'll look at my colleague Florence, who will take it from here. Thank you very much.
I just want to thank you very much for your attendance. I hope you enjoyed this fast-track session. Please come to our booth if you have any questions. Please take the opportunity to ask any questions afterwards to our panelists. They use Traveler and SiteMinder. We'll stay here a couple of minutes. And thank you very much. See you next time. Please don't hesitate to come forward.